guys! So today's video is another disability discourse, and the topic is going to be how to refer to disabled people and how we talk about disabilities. This is a huge topic, and as always, I'm only an expert in my own personal experience, and I have tried to talk to other people about this, so I have their wisdom and knowledge to draw on as well. However, there are going to be things that I miss, and there are going to be things that I don't explain right, so if you have more experience than me, please talk about it in the comments. This is, as always, a conversation, not a lecture, at least I hope that's what it is, so please let me know anything that I get wrong or anything that I miss out, or just your experiences generally with this kind of thing. Please talk about them in the comments, and if you're watching this video, please go down now and start reading the comments, because hopefully people will have some really insightful and interesting and knowledgeable things to say. Okay, so like I said, this is a gigantic topic, and I'm going to try to keep it quite simple for this because it is supposed to be like an introductory type thing, and I don't want to get into every rabbit hole that exists within this topic because there are a lot. So I'm going to start off with the most simple and basic way to be respectful of disabled people when referring to us. And if you just watch like, I don't know, a minute of this video, hopefully this will give you a good idea of just a really simple way to do this. And that is listen to disabled people. There are two easy ways that I would say to do this. The first is to ask us how we prefer to be referred to. Really simple, takes like 2 seconds, and most of us will be really happy to answer and genuinely just happy that you are interested enough or care enough to ask. So first is ask us how we want to be referred to, really easy, and then you'll know that you aren't being offensive or inappropriate in any way. The second is if you can't ask for whatever reason, listen to how we refer to ourselves. So if someone refers to themselves as disabled, then chances are they're fine with that term being used about them. If they use the specific name of their illness, then chances are they're happier with that. This is a really easy way to tell what terms people are comfortable with being used and what terms people are not comfortable with. So yeah, that's like the simplest thing ever. There are a few nuances to this, but in general, listen to disabled people and how we refer to ourselves, and that will give you a good idea of what is comfortable for that specific person. When referring to the wider group, like the disability community, I think the word disabled is fine. Now, I have had a lot of abled people tell me that it's not fine. However, I'm going to be totally honest and say that I've yet to meet a disabled person who doesn't like the word disability or finds it offensive. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that that is abled people projecting onto us and telling us how to feel, because every time I've had this conversation, it goes something like this. I'm disabled. Oh, no, that's such a negative term. You shouldn't call yourself disabled. You're not disabled. You're differently abled. Like, every time I have this conversation, it feels like the abled person is trying to make themselves feel better about my condition, and it's very weird. So I think that the word disabled for the wider community is fine. I've never met a disabled person, as I said, who has an issue with it, so I would just go with that. And leading on from that last point, just one other way to be respectful. Obviously, don't tell us how to refer to ourselves if we refer to ourselves as disabled. Obviously, we don't think of that as a negative term or an offensive term. And you, as an able person, do not get to decide whether it is or not. So yeah, that's just a really basic outline of how to talk about disabilities and disabled people as individuals, and then also the disabled community as a wider group. So if you only watch like 2 minutes of this video, hopefully that gives you a nice enough outline that you're able to be more comfortable with this kind of thing. Okay, so we've talked about how to refer to disabled people. I just want to quickly run over some ways not to refer to disabled people. So obviously there are some offensive terms out there. I'm gonna straight up say that with my type of disability, I don't run into as many slurs as a lot of the disabled community do. So if you have first-hand experience with that more than I do, please leave your thoughts and feelings in the comments below, because it's really important to talk about this, and I'm not the person to do it. So I'm gonna give, like, once again, a really simple, really brief outline of this, but this is not something that I have a lot of experience in, so just bear that in mind. So there are a few terms that are universally considered offensive. The first is the R word, or retarded, and I feel uncomfortable just saying that. It is a slur. It is completely inappropriate to use. It's not okay to use, not just about disabled people, but just in general, just don't use that word. It's not an okay word to use. The second is invalid. And I've noticed that even some like advocacy agencies and disability benefits will still use the word invalid. I'm not quite sure why you would ever think that a word that is literally invalid would be an appropriate or non-offensive way to refer to a person, but yeah, do not use the word invalid. It's not okay. The next word, the next term I should say, because it's two words, is not necessarily like a slur or super offensive, but it is generally frowned upon, and that is wheelchair bound. Kind of implies that you're like trapped rather than like, I don't know how to explain this because, once again, not usually a wheelchair user. However, it gives that like negative connotation, right? So you're trapped in the wheelchair rather than the wheelchair being an accessibility tool that actually helps you, and like you using the wheelchair to do more things, you're like trapped there. So wheelchair user is the generally accepted term for that. Okay, so that's like the actually terms that you really shouldn't use because they're kind of offensive or have bad connotations, or the ones that I personally can think of and talk about. The next is just that kind of patronizing or condescending language, and this is something that I experience a lot more than actual slurs. This seems to be much more common, and these people tend to be people who think that they're being nice, but really they're not. So this includes terms like differently abled or special needs. And the reason that these are so not okay is that if I refer to myself as disabled and then you come along as an able person and say, oh, no, you're not disabled, you're differently abled. You're not doing that for me. You're doing that to try to make yourself feel better about my condition. And that's really messed up. So you and I both know when we're having this conversation, you don't really think that I'm differently abled. You think I'm disabled because I am disabled, but you want to make yourself feel better about this conversation and feel like a good person. So you're like, oh, no, differently abled. It's just kind of a weird thing to say to someone. Same with like special. Oh, no, you're special. Like, no, don't do that. It feels very condescending. It feels like you're talking down to us, and it's kind of gross, really gross. So that is some terms that you shouldn't use. The next thing we'll talk about is person-first language. This is kind of a complex topic because it's not universally agreed upon. You may have noticed that I say disabled people instead of people with disabilities. So that's me not using person-first language. And that's because person-first language is not something that I consider to be that important, and I haven't met that many people within the disabled community who consider it to be that important. So it's not something that I put a lot of thought into. That's my bad, really. So person-first language, if you don't know what it is, it's basically referring to the person first, as the title implies, and then the thing about them second. So it would be person with a disability rather than disabled person. As I say, this is not universal at all. A lot of people don't care about it, but some people do, and it's important to know that if someone asks you to use person-first language, do that. The exception to this rule, I have been told, is the autistic community, and the reason that they prefer non-person first language is, or at least this is how it's been explained to me, so again, please correct me if I'm wrong, is because person-first language separates the thing and the person. That's the whole point of person-first language. And for the autistic community, autism isn't something that is wrong with you or something that you have. It's something that you are. So they prefer not to be separated from autism. So they want to be called autistic rather than person with autism. Or at least that's, once again, how it's been explained to me. So again, person-first language can be a little complicated just because not everyone prefers it, and some people, in fact, actively do not prefer it. So I think more than trying to use this in every situation, just be aware that it exists, and if someone asks you to refer to them in person-first language, you'll understand, hopefully, why they want that. The last term that I want to talk about in terms of how to refer to disabled folks is cripple. And once again, like person-first language, this one has a lot of nuances. So within the disabled community, there is a movement to take back the word cripple and use it for positive things, like cripple punk, things like that. You'll probably see a lot of disabled folks referring to ourselves as cripple. However, despite me saying in the beginning that you should copy how we refer to ourselves, this is part of that you shouldn't copy. Despite disabled people taking back this word, it's still not okay for able people to use the word cripple. Like, not at all. It's a pretty offensive word for an able person to use. Just because disabled people use it doesn't mean that able people should be using it. Okay, so that's a really simple rundown of some terms. I'm trying to keep this as quick and simple as possible because there's just so many areas where I could go into way more detail, but that would make this video like 10 hours long, and I'm not really into that, you know? So those are some terms for disabled people or for the disabled community. Next, I just wanted to do kind of a glossary of some general terms that you might see used in the disabled community that you might not know what they mean. Okay, so the first is spoonie, and a spoonie is someone with a disability, and it derives from the spoon theory, which if you haven't seen, I really recommend you look up the spoon theory. It's a really great and simple way for able people to understand disabilities and especially chronic pain conditions. So basically the spoon theory says that we measure our energy in spoons, and disabled people have a very limited number of spoons to go through each day. And once you're out of spoons, that's it. So from there, disabled people sometimes refer to ourselves as spoonies. That's where that one comes from, and that's what it means. The next is neurodivergent and neurotypical. Neurodivergent just refers to people with either mental health issues, autism, or any disability or illness or autism that affects the way that your brain works. So that is neurodivergent. Obviously, there's a divergence in their neurology. And neurotypical is the opposite of that, where your neurology is typical. Pretty simple, right? Next is autistic, and that is the opposite of autistic. So people with autism, autistic people, are autistic, and people without autism are allistic. Again, pretty simple. Okay, so that is, I think, pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about this time around. There's so much more in this topic, and when I was writing notes for this, I just wrote like pages and pages, and then I kept cutting it back because I feel like I did want this to be quite simple and introductory and not too daunting or scary for anyone who is getting into all of this for the first time. So I think that's where I'll leave it for today. I will probably end up doing another video with more detail on certain parts of what I covered here, just because there's so much to talk about and it's all really important, but I don't think this is the right video for that. So for now, I hope that this has been informative, and please leave your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. I always love to learn new things and to hear about things that I did wrong, because I know that there will have been like a lot. So please leave your experiences and thoughts and feelings in the comments below. I always really appreciate it, and I love hearing from you guys and hearing what you have to say. Okay, thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you next time. Bye!